Story 1. The Security Guard's Visitor. I used to work as a security guard for an office building downtown. The place was dead quiet at night, just me, the rows of darkened cubicles, and the occasional buzz of a flickering fluorescent light. It seemed like an easy job at first, just doing my rounds, making sure everything was locked up and watching the surveillance monitors. But that was before the night I saw her. It was a little past 2 a.m., and I was doing my usual patrol when I noticed something strange on the security cameras. A flicker of movement on the second floor. I zoomed in, thinking it was a trick of the light or a bug crawling across the lens. But then I saw it. A woman. She was standing completely still in the middle of the hallway, facing away from the camera. Her long hair hung down, obscuring her face, and she was dressed in a thin, white gown that looked out of place for the time of year. I radioed in to see if there were any cleaning staff scheduled for the night. Nothing. I called out, "Hello?" hoping it was just a mistake, but she didn't respond. I hesitated for a moment before heading up to the second floor to check it out in person. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding, and I stepped out into the darkened hallway, my flashlight cutting through the shadows. The air was cold, much colder than it should have been, and the silence was unnerving. I walked slowly, my footsteps echoing off the walls. I reached the spot where I'd seen her on the camera. Empty. There was no sign of the woman. I turned around, preparing to head back downstairs, when suddenly I heard a noise. A faint, dragging sound coming from one of the nearby offices. I shone my flashlight down the hall, and there she was again, just a few feet away, standing in the doorway. Her head was tilted slightly to the side, and I could see her pale face now, eyes wide open but unblinking. My heart raced as I asked, "Are you okay, ma'am?" But she didn't move. She just stared at me, like she was waiting for something. And then, she smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It was a twisted, too wide grin that stretched her lips back unnaturally. The air grew colder, and I took a step back. In that instant, the lights flickered, and when they came back on, she was gone. I searched every room on that floor, but there was no sign of anyone. I went back to the security room and rewound the footage, hoping to find an explanation, but there was nothing there. It was as if she had never been on the camera at all. But I know what I saw. And sometimes, late at night, I swear I can still hear that faint dragging sound echoing down the hall. Story 2. The Graveyard Shift. I used to work the graveyard shift at a gas station off the highway. It wasn't the safest area, but it was quiet most nights, just me and the hum of the coolers. I'd spend the nights reading or scrolling through my phone, keeping an eye out for the occasional customer who wandered in. But one night something happened that still sends chills down my spine. It was just after 3 a.m., and I hadn't seen a car for hours. I was behind the counter, half asleep, when I heard a faint tapping on the glass door. I looked up, expecting to see someone standing outside, but there was no one there. I chalked it up to the wind or some loose sign rattling in the breeze and went back to scrolling on my phone. A few minutes later, the tapping came again, louder this time. I walked to the front of the store, peering out into the empty parking lot, but there was no one around. That's when I noticed something strange. The lights in the parking lot were flickering, casting long, eerie shadows across the asphalt. It felt like the darkness was alive, closing in around the station. I turned to head back inside, but stopped dead in my tracks. In the reflection of the glass door, I saw someone standing behind me. My breath hitched and I spun around, but there was no one there, just empty aisles and rows of snacks. I tried to shake it off, but the unease was growing stronger, like I was being watched. I returned to the counter, checking the security monitors to calm my nerves. That's when I saw it. A figure standing at the edge of the camera's view, just outside the range of the parking lot lights. It was a tall, shadowy shape, almost human-like but too thin, its limbs unnaturally long. I stared at the monitor, frozen in fear. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, watching. Then, As if sensing my gaze, it started walking toward the gas station slowly, deliberately. I reached under the counter, my hand trembling as I grabbed the emergency phone to call the police. I dialed 911, but as I looked back at the screen, the figure was gone. There was no sign of it anywhere. The police arrived not long after, but they found nothing unusual. No one was around, and there were no signs of anyone having been there. But I know what I saw. Ever since that night, I haven't been able to work the graveyard shift without feeling that cold gaze on the back of my neck. Story 3. The Warehouse Haunting. I worked the night shift in a large warehouse for a shipping company. The place was huge, filled with towering shelves and endless rows of crates and boxes. At night, the lights were dimmed, casting deep shadows that seemed to stretch forever. I was used to the eerie quiet, but there was one section of the warehouse that always gave me the creeps. It was the far corner, a part of the building that hadn't been used in years. The shelves were covered in dust, the air thick and musty. Some of the older employees joked that it was haunted, that strange things happened there late at night. I never believed them, until that one night. I was making my rounds, walking through the aisles when I heard it. A soft whisper. It was faint at first, almost like a breeze rustling through the old boxes. But as I got closer to that far corner, the whispers grew louder, almost like voices. I turned the corner, shining my flashlight down the aisle, and there it was. A figure, standing at the end of the row. It was dark, too dark to make out any features, but I could see the faint outline of a person, just standing there, motionless. I called out, "Hey, you're not supposed to be here," but there was no response. As I approached, the figure seemed to dissolve into the darkness, like smoke. I reached the end of the aisle, shining my light around, but there was no one there. The whispers had stopped, but the air felt heavy, charged with something I couldn't explain. I was about to turn back when I felt it, a cold hand on my shoulder. I spun around, but there was nothing there. I rushed back to the main area, my heart pounding. I didn't tell anyone what I had seen, but that corner of the warehouse was different after that night. The shadows seemed darker, the air colder, and the whispers still came. Late at night, when everything else was silent, I'd hear them again, calling my name from the darkness.